Good evening, everybody. It is now 6 o'clock. Welcome to the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. We are celebrating Women's History Month. It is also International Women's Day today. I'm very, very excited. So we're going to, just give a couple of moments for everybody to start rolling in. In the meantime, I want to introduce myself and our moderator for the evening. My name is Antecisa Green, and I am president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. Thank you so much for joining us here today. This is the first of a series of fireside chats that we will be having with some absolutely phenomenal women to hear about them, their professional journey, hear about them, their personal lives, and just get some insight and wisdom from them as we celebrate Women's History Month. Please, if you are not a member, please make sure you sign up, www.mbanyc.org, so that you can see all of the amazing events that we have coming up for Women's History Month as well. And also save the date, our virtual gala. I'm sorry, we still can't be in person and rock it, but our gala is going to be absolutely awesome. So May 21st, save the date. So I want to present, I'm so honored to have Nicole Lester Arendelle as our moderator today. Nicole is absolutely phenomenal. She is a member of the Board of Trustees of MBBA. She also is co-chair of our Community Outreach and Pro Bono Committee, and Nicole and her co-chair are responsible for all of the brief legal advice clinics that we have been able to launch virtually during COVID. She has a long history, background and expertise in legal services, and we're so lucky to be able to have her. Nicole is also Senior Director in Government Relations Counsel at Equitable Holdings, Inc. And so I'm pleased to now hand it over to Nicole. If you guys have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function. Please, go ahead, use that chat function, talk it up, send the kudos, shout that amen every once in a while, because this is going to be a fantastic conversation. So with that, please, Nicole, take over.
Thank you, Anta. Good evening, everyone. As Anta mentioned, I'm Nicole Lester Arendelle. I'm on the board of the MBBA, and it's such a pleasure to be with you all tonight, and I'm glad you were able to join us for this conversation. As Anta also mentioned, it is International Women's Day, and what a great way to kick off this series for Women's History Month. And with International Women's Day, the actual theme for this year is choose to challenge. And when you think about that in terms of women, and we think about all of the things that women are going through at this time, particularly during the pandemic, choose to challenge to call out gender bias and inequality. Choose to challenge those microaggressions that you see happening in your workplace. We can choose to challenge the lack of equity that we see in our workplaces. And we can also choose to challenge ourselves, others, our elected officials, to take action to fight these things, to fight gender bias, to advance gender equity. And we can also take time to choose to challenge ourselves to celebrate women, right? And all of our achievements. And that's something we want to do as a part of this series. We want to give Black women lawyers their flowers, their kudos, their claps now. And we know that Women's History Month reminds us of all of the historical things that women have done throughout the years, but it also gives us a time to really think about the women who are making change right now, the women who are trailblazing, the people who are making an impact right now. So that's what we want to do with this series. So I will be leading the conversation tonight. However, we do want to hear from you. So again, use the Q&A function for any questions that you might have, and we'll try to interweave those in to the conversation. And yes, use the chat as the amen corner. If you hear something that resonates with you, you're like, yes, girl, I hear you. Use the chat function so we can know that you're there, you're listening, and that you're engaged. Because in this virtual environment, that's about all we have is that chat function to get the thumbs up there. So tonight we get to celebrate the achievements and the success and amplify the voice of Natalie Lamarque. And I'm very excited about her participation in this series tonight. We're going to hear from her about her professional journey, some of her challenges along the way, and how she has broken barriers as well throughout her career. We know that women throughout history continue to do that. There's actually a quote by a motivational speaker that I want to point out, Peggy Echevarria, who says, "Women leaders make it happen." And Natalie is one of those women leaders who makes it happen. Natalie is Senior Vice President and General Counsel at New York Life Insurance Company, the third largest insurance company in the US. It's the largest mutual life insurance company in the US. It's a company that's in the Fortune 100. And stats show that Black general counsels make up about 5% of the Fortune 1000 companies. So I know that that's like big strides for us, quite frankly, because I think 2 years ago, maybe we only made up 2% of the general counsel. So we've come a long way. We have a long ways to go. But when we think about that 5% number, quite frankly, that's about 53 Black general counsels out of 1,000 companies. It's not a lot. So seeing someone like Natalie, being around someone like Natalie, and getting a chance to hear from someone like Natalie is not a commonality. So with that, Natalie, I want you to talk to us a bit about your career journey. How did you get to this general counsel seat? If you could kind of summarize your career journey to get to this place where we just don't see a lot of us.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I am a huge fan and have been a part of the MBBA for a long time. And Nicole, you know, I'm a huge fan of yours. You're doing lots of things as well. And before I start, I just also want to shout out my line sister just sent me like a chat. Oh, it was so nice. Okay, sorry. Back to the meat and potatoes of it. So, you know, I think oftentimes, right, we tend to look at folks who have made it to a certain place in their career and assume that it was foretold in some shape, way, or form, right? That their path was somehow linear, and it didn't have a bunch of setbacks. So, you know, I want to be real clear. Any woman I know who is in a GC role or a senior role, their paths very rarely are linear. What I mean by that is rarely do you sort of go from like the one role to the next role, to the next role, to the next role, to the next role. Oftentimes you'll hear about career changes. You'll hear about taking huge risks, right? Jumping into an area where they weren't necessarily versed as the thing that ended up helping open the door to that ultimate role that they wanted. And, you know, also you'll hear about a lot of setbacks. I mean, there are a lot of times where I've been told, and I'm sure you have, Nicole, I'm sure like most of the people on the call have been told, you know, essentially you're reaching too far. You think you can do more than you really can. And you have to, what I talk about with a lot of my mentors who are still hugely supportive and my mentees is you have to learn to become your own internal critic, but also your own internal fan, right? Because you can't let that external environment be the judge of what it is you can or can't achieve. You have to take that on yourself, but it means you have to be incredibly critical of yourself. And I think as Black women, what we have to also do is like praise ourselves, which I don't think we do enough in our own minds. So I think that's how you get there is, number one, it's not linear, right? Number two, you have to be willing to take some pretty big risks.
And can you talk a little bit more about the risks that you feel like you've taken? Because I think we do have people who are viewing this who see the GC office as like the destination. That's where they're trying to get to. And you mentioned, you know, the path not necessarily being linear. Can you talk specifically about maybe some challenge that you faced and how you overcame that to move to that next level?
Well, I would say, you know, when I think about first jumping from government, right, working at the U.S. Attorney's Office to going in-house, you know, oftentimes when people are leaving the government, especially if you've had like a pretty good government role, like a plum government role, you'll get a lot of advice that you need to take a certain title. You need to come into the company at a certain level. I didn't do that. I came into the company as an associate general counsel, which is one of our more senior lawyers in the litigation group. I didn't have like a special title. I didn't have a special role. Like, it wasn't like that. I came to the company and I chose to do that, even though a lot of mentors, a lot of people who I consider very close colleagues said, that's crazy. You're taking 6 steps back in your career. Why would you do that, right? You're giving up the plateau of like leaving the Southern District of New York, which is just the only time you're ever going to have this plateau. You get a lot of advice like that. And I made that decision, which was a risk, right? Because in-house roles are traditionally pretty flat. There's not that much movement in an in-house department because, there are quite a few lawyers, but as you move up in the ranks, it really does shrink in terms of the roles. And I did it because, and that was a risk, first and foremost, I knew the company was a good company, right? I knew that the way it ran itself was well run. Second, the woman who brought me in, I knew was smart. She believed in diversity and inclusion. She was a mom of 2 boys. We talked about those issues. I knew that I would develop, even if I didn't get to whatever role or, I didn't come in thinking I'm going to be the general counsel of New York Life Insurance. Let's be clear. That was not I walk in think not at all. But I knew I would learn a ton from her. And fundamentally, I think the third piece was I just really felt like the people were ethical, right? They were good people. And, as a financial services company at the level that it is, to have just like, you run into people and it's like a no jerk zone or a very low jerk potential like threshold. That matters. And that mattered to me. So I would say that's one risk. Another risk was one thing that happens when you do go in-house, and I think this probably happens at firms too, is people distinguish themselves very quickly. There are certain people who want to do what they're good at, and that's all they want to do. And they want to be recognized, and they want to advance for the things that they're good at. Then there are people who realize that probably that's too narrow a bridge, right? I actually have to try things I'm not good at. I have to completely leave areas that I'm comfortable in to take risks to show either myself or the organization that I can do things where I'm not like an expert in it. And so that would be, I would say, the second big risk was, I think about maybe a year and a half after I started the company, my boss basically said, hey, you want to go to compliance and stay and just, do compliance for a while. Again, mentors, I love y'all, were like, that's terrible. Don't do that. It's the worst idea. You're derailing your career. I mean, same kind of, same thing happened again. And I said, you know what? I want to learn about this. I personally believe if you're going to be a general counsel of a highly regulated company in a highly regulated industry, you got to know compliance like the back of your hand. Like you really do need to understand it. So I was like, okay, I'll learn something new. I trust this person who is sponsoring me. About a year into that job, she said, I think you should take your Series 7, which I don't know about if all y'all know that. It's a licensing test. It's to become a registered rep. It's not fun. I am a lawyer. I'm a former prosecutor, and now I'm studying options. I'm studying like trade rules. I'm having to I mean, it was just, and I got 2 little kids at home. I have a beautiful husband. And, so I took that test. And of course, everyone in my sort of lawyer world is saying, you're getting further and further away from the law. What are you doing? But I learned a ton, right? And I was enjoying what I was doing. Then like another year goes by and she's like, you really should take your Series 24, which is another one of these monsters, just like the bar exam. Okay. This is painful. And she said to me, listen, if you want the street cred and you really want people to understand that you're in it with them and that you can supervise all of these, we have a large sales force, right? 12,000 agents. And about half of them are registered representatives. So they're, SEC, FINRA, regulated, et cetera. So took that test, right? And then I never thought I was going back to the law in terms of, I wasn't like guaranteed like, oh, go do this for a couple of years and then you're going to go back to the law department. It wasn't like that. So I was like, okay, look, if it gets to a point where my interests and the organization's interests diverge, then I'll have to make that decision when it comes. But right now, I just want to continue to learn. And the people are fantastic, as I said, and the company's well run. So that was a heavy lift and a risk. And about 2 years after, so I'd been in compliance 3 years at this point. That's when I got tapped to say, hey, I'd like for you to come back to the law department and actually take over, succeed me as general counsel. That was a surprise. I did not know that was coming. So if I would have taken the role in compliance with the mindset of, I just want to be GC, that is derailing me from the linear kind of target of what I want to do, I wouldn't be here.
Right. And I want to just touch on a couple of points you mentioned there. You talked about the mentor, right? The good and the bad of our mentors, right? They encourage us. They try to, give us that advice that we need when they think we're going in a different direction. But sometimes we have to be like you said earlier, be our own inner champions, right? This is what I think I need to do to further myself. You also talked about people who sound like they were sponsors for you, people who somehow said, you know what, Natalie, we're going to get her out of compliance and back into the law department. And a lot of times when you read, statistically, Black women have a lot of trouble in getting sponsors and mentors in the workplace. Can you talk a little bit more about perhaps, any strategies that you use to get these people involved in your career and in your journey? Can you just touch a little bit on the sponsor and the mentor? Because it sounds like that really did help shape a lot of your direction.
So this sounds a little counterintuitive, but the best way to get a mentor or a sponsor is to be a mentor or a sponsor. That's how, first, I've been blessed to have mentors and sponsors my whole career. And almost all of them I found through people I was mentoring or sponsoring. It's almost like a community, right? When people see you giving to others and reaching back and lifting up others, what do they want to do for you? Their instinct is to give you what it is you are putting out in the world. So I think that I always found that when we sort of focus on the end product, what I want, as opposed to what I'm willing to give, I think that's usually where you kind of get derailed. So, people watching you mentor, all these senior people who have no time, right? They're all strapped for time. Mm-hmm. They got a bunch of people calling them, raising their hand. Who do you think they want to take that 5 minutes or 10 minutes to help? They want to take the time to help that person they see helping other people, because that just shows, it aggregates, right? And it expands and amplifies all the time they're going to spend with you. They know that if they spend 15 minutes with you, you're going to do that with 6 other people. That's, to me, how you show, one, you're not self-centered, right? You're not achieving just for ego's sake. You're achieving because you're connected to a larger collective that you want to bring up with you. And to me, those are the people who are the good sponsors and the good mentors, right? They're the folks who are invested in you. And you can't ask someone to invest in you if you're not invested in anybody else.
I love that. I mean, you have to invest in others. And I truly do believe that. And I've been fortunate to have great mentors and sponsors throughout my career as well. But I'm also a person who makes sure that I'm mentoring other women, particularly as they are progressing in their profession. And you never know who's watching. I feel like these sponsors, the sponsors that I've had, and it sounds like just for you too, they come out of nowhere. It's like people who are talking about you in rooms and you didn't even know they knew you existed, but they see how you work, how you interact with your colleagues, how you step up and volunteer to do the work that maybe somebody else isn't interested in doing. And then all of a sudden you're getting other opportunities. And so I think I love that you touched on that, because I think people need to hear that. That's what it's about, right? Investing in others, doing your job well, people will see that and they want to invest in you. And it sounds like that's how you've been able to progress as well. Awesome.
I mean, but also, Nicole, I've actually gotten some of the best mentors and sponsors from some other people I'm mentoring and sponsoring, right? So they say to what someone else, oh, I had this great conversation with Natalie. These are folks that, call for career advice, or, or switching jobs and just want to like spitball. And they end up sending people my way that have opened doors and helped me in ways I would never have been able to do without them. So it's who you are. It's what you give off, but it's also actually what I find is when you kind of enter the giving side of the profession, everyone knows each other. Do you notice that? Like, if you think about who your mentors are and who your sponsors are, they all know each other. There's like a 1 degree or -1 degree connection between all of them. So I think that the richer
and
that
particularly in the legal.
Exactly.
Right. And particularly in the legal community, right? It's small. People always joke that there's so many lawyers, but the legal community is small enough for somebody to be like, Natalie, I know her, right? Nicole, right? It's small enough for people to actually have opinions about each other and have worked with you or know someone who did work with you closely. So you're right. I think another piece of that, though, is the networking. When we think about building relationships, you're building relationships internally in your organization and externally, right? And networking has been something that's been a great tool for me to advance my career. Can you talk a bit about how networking has helped you in your career advancement?
Sure. I think when I think about networking, I mean, part of it honestly is the mentoring and the sponsoring. To me, that's a huge piece of my networking. And I find that that's the richest piece, to be quite frank. When I think about networking, I often think about like the different circles of your network, right? Whether it's within your company, and then within your industry, and then it's within your profession, and then it's within whatever groups feed your soul, right? Like I think as Black women, as underrepresented groups, you really need to feed your soul, because you will be taking quite a bit of hits along the way. And if you don't have those like overlapping concentric circles and you'll find that the circles overlap, and there's like a core crew that you can kind of go to for everything, right? Like they're either in your company, in your industry, they're Black women, they understand, you have a smaller crew that you kind of lean on a little more heavily. But when I think about networking and sometimes with mentors or mentees, I'll power map, right? So you have to step out and say, how are you power mapping your networking? Like what areas do you want to learn about that you feel like you have, room to grow? Do you know people in those networks? And you can use the individuals you do know to say, you know what, I'd really like to learn. I actually did this last week. I really need to learn a little bit more about reading financial statements. And I don't want to learn about it as a lawyer, right? I know what to look for and like what to pick apart from the disclosures. I want a business person to tell me what they are worried about when they look at these statements. And so I called Ben Wilson, who I'm sure like half the people on this call know. And I said, Ben, I really want to learn about this. And he said, you need to talk to this person. And, I set up a call with that person, and he talked, he was a former CEO. He talked me through what his worries were. So I think it's the power mapping, it's the areas where you want to grow, it's how you're going to feed your soul, because I think that's even more important sometimes than learning about that substantive issue. But it's a verb, right? It's a verb. It doesn't happen. You have to actually be intentional about it and put some time into it.
Right. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, which a lot of people sometimes taint the word networking as if it's this horrible thing, because it's always, I think, positioned as something that you're trying to get out of this. You are trying to get something out of it, but you also should be giving, right? And you talked about that two-way street with the networking as well. And I know that networking has been helpful for me, even in terms of not just career inside, but externally, just mixing with other people from different industries, getting active on boards of organizations. I've been able to network through that as well. And I know board service is something important to you too. Can you talk a bit about your board service and how people can really leverage board service as a way to progress in their careers and even help with and strengthen their networks?
The areas where I serve on nonprofit boards are areas that speak to me, that I feel passionate about, because it's a lot of work, right? It's serving on boards a lot of work, right? So,
yes, it is.
And I co-chair the board of City Year New York, which is an educational nonprofit focused on near-peer mentoring, where young folks are going into the schools and mentoring, tutoring, supporting, and giving social emotional support to our students in middle school and high school, in underrepresented parts of New York City. And I also sit on the board of trustees of City Year, the national organization. And that takes a lot of my time. And my husband's a public school teacher, so he teaches history, and he's also a football coach. And he actually teaches at the school he graduated from, which is a trip. So like some of his colleagues knew when he was a knucklehead, like still talk about the stuff he did when he was, a student. So, I think, look, if there was a theme for me, Nicole, it would be primarily make choices based on, what your passion, what speaks to you, and let the career development, the advancement, all of that grow from that base, right? So I would say I joined nonprofit boards primarily because what their missions spoke to me. But my God, the networking that has come from it has been phenomenal. But I think if I hadn't approached it from the perspective of, this is something I'm passionate about, this is something I'm very interested in, I don't know that the networks, the relationships I developed would have been as grounded or as deep. When it comes to profit boards, I'm not on for-profit board. It's something that, I'm definitely looking into, but I'm also just trying to get my arms wrapped around my job. I just became general counsel in the middle of COVID-19. So, it's a lot going on. So that's something, a lot of lawyers are now getting on profit boards as well. And there are tons of organizations focused on getting us board ready. So, I would say that if it's something that interests you, you should definitely look into it, but it is a commitment. So it's something you've got to be ready to give a ton of time to. And you just need to make sure you balance that with whatever, whether it's family, health, mental health in the middle of a pandemic, work requirements, right? There are opportunities out there, but we also shouldn't be killing ourselves to sort of grab every single one.
We have to learn how to use the word no. No is okay to say sometimes, right? I mean, particularly as lawyers, we say it all the time to our internal business clients. We need to say it to everybody else too, which I feel like we don't do it enough. I know I can definitely wear one of those t-shirts they put on Instagram that says doing the absolute most, because most times I am doing the absolute most. My husband will tell you that for sure. He's like, what you doing tonight? You hosting a fireside chat? Yes, I am doing the absolute most, but we do need to learn how to use the word no, right? We can't do everything. And on that note though, the can't do everything, and you mentioned a balancing of work and family and life. I mean, I feel like it's more like a juggle, Natalie. I don't know how you're balancing. You'll have to teach me your tricks, but I feel like I am juggling full-time job, civically active. I have a 3-year-old. If we were actually sitting in person, you would see my baby bump. I'm expecting, and I'm due in July. So another baby on the way. So I feel like there's so many balls in the air, and there's going to be even more. How do you do it? Like you said, you became a general counsel during COVID, and you have a family. Tell us what are your tricks? What are your tools? What are you doing to juggle all of those things?
Well, look, first and foremost, my husband is phenomenal and is, an amazing partner. But I would say you don't do everything at once. And you have to learn to lean into what needs to be leaned into at that time. So there are times when it has to be your career. There's a transition happening like right now, right? You're entering a new role, you're leading into your career, you're spending probably more time than you normally do. the nights are longer. But there are times where your kids need you, and you lean into that, and you articulate that to your colleagues, and you articulate that to your manager and to your bosses, right? And there are times where your spouse needs you or a loved one needs you. And I think, if there can be a silver lining to this incredibly horrific time that we've all been living through, it's that, at least in our work lives, there is more of an understanding of these personal needs and pulls. And quite frankly, more of the men in our lives understand the difficulties of trying to balance family life and work life. They've kind of been thrust into, some were already there, but the few that weren't have really been thrust into sort of, how do you juggle this in real time? So I think if there's ever been a time to take advantage of people's humanity and being a little more vulnerable and open than you normally would be, now is the time. I would say, I've had some phenomenal Black women mentors who have, I clerked for a woman, I'm sure like literally probably everybody on this call knows, Ann Williams, out of Chicago, out of the 7th Circuit. And, that was like my first real grown-up job, and she is a beautiful, like, human being, mom, wife, amazing sister, daughter, and she brought all of that into Chambers, right? So she didn't try to segregate her life. She taught us that you can bring it together, because sometimes there's only 24 hours in a day, and sometimes you're going to need to have your child with you at the event while you're going to have to combine worlds. Those are the women that I've seen that have been able to, it's not balance, but it's give themselves the grace, right, to just not feel like they have to be torn into 6 different pieces to make all of these different aspects of their lives work. They stay whole. And, it takes a little bit more flexibility from their loved ones, right? And it takes a little more flexibility from their workplaces. But what I have seen is that it can work when you over communicate, when obviously you bring your excellence, right? You bring your skill set. But when you bring that empathy and you articulate that vulnerability, what I have seen in this role, talking to people about, the difficulties I'm having, the relationships in the work environment are different, categorically different now than they were.
Yeah, I think some women struggle with that though, Natalie, especially now, right? We have this Zoom environment, Microsoft Teams environment. People are literally looking at your home as they're talking to you during the workday. They can hear what's happening in your house. And I think women, we always want to, be doing 10 times better than everybody else, particularly Black women. We're trying to do 10 times better than everybody else on our team and the department. But how do you do that and still, your kid is crying in the background, you have a stain on your shirt from cooking some lunch. I think it's very hard for some women to feel like they are showing up as the woman who's getting the job done when all of these other kind of things are happening in their houses. And I know I've talked to some team members who feel like they don't want their kid to burst in on the Zoom call. They feel like, oh no, I can't be the woman on the team with the kid bursting on the Zoom call. But it sounds like what you're saying is that even that in itself is an act of vulnerability to show people, right? Look, I can still do this job effectively, even with my 3-year-old busting in the room, right?
That's right. I mean, look, you can't let your 3-year-old come in every day, all the time, right? Because then you can't get your job done. But, you can show that you have, first of all, I'll give you an example, which I think is, an important, it was an interesting decision on my part. So I had my first town hall for my legal department. And all this means all the lawyers, paralegals, and we have about maybe close to 90 attorneys. And but a full department with administrative support, like 135 people. So for my first town hall, I had my 7-year-old interview me on Zoom. So he like came in, he had his questions, he got his clipboard. Now you have a 3-year-old, Nicole, and I'm sure a bunch of people on the Zoom have kids. You never know what they're gonna say. You never know what's gonna actually come out of their mouths, especially little boys. I love y'all, but it's just something different. And so, but I did that on purpose, right? It wasn't about whether he was gonna, like ask some profound questions. It was because if I didn't do it and show that it wasn't a big deal and he was good and he embarrassed me, right? I knew he was gonna do that. Because, I mean, what 7-year-old boy would not take the opportunity to embarrass their mom, right? Like in that kind of a setting. But I did that on purpose because I wanted the people that I work with to see that happen and not feel the level of stigma or beat themselves up about it. So I think that it's a process. Now, does my 7-year-old come in during our executive management committee meetings, like with the CEO? No, he does not. Like there are moments where I'm like, listen, this one right here, no, right? But then there are other times where I'm like, it's not that big a deal. So it goes to your point about like balancing it or juggling it. And sort of my take, which is there are moments where you lean and there are moments you lean out, right? Executive management committee meeting, lean in. Like that's not gonna work. But I'm having my one-on-ones with my direct reports or, yada, yada, or whatever. Okay, so what? You come in, you grab something, okay, whatever. Board of directors meeting, lean in. No, get up, come here now. You see what I'm saying? So it's not about getting it all perfect all the time. It's about understanding, prioritizing, picking those moments, whether the moments are for the family or for work. And honestly, like saying to yourself, it's okay, right? When you're leaned out of whatever it is you're leaning out from. I'm still struggling with that, right? Not beating yourself up for the moment where you have to lean out and away from something else that's happening.
Well, honestly, Natalie, you as a general counsel, you're the leader of a law department, and to see you have your son introduce you and engage and interact, have him interact with you in that way, I think that definitely did help your employees feel a whole lot better about, what they may have going on in their houses. I don't think every leader is necessarily doing that in these workplaces, unfortunately. So I feel like some people still have to struggle with trying to, keep their personal life separate, even though you're working from home. But that brings me to just thinking about like qualities of leadership. I mean, it sounds like it would be great to be on your team. Can you talk about what do you think is that one characteristic or trait that every leader should possess?
It's hard to say one. If I had to prioritize, it would be empathy.
Particularly now, right? During this time period, for sure.
Because think about it, right? We often think, look, there are so many foundational points, like innate intelligence, curiosity, comfort with being uncomfortable, because quite frankly, a lot of those leadership moments are being thrown into a specific area where you're not versed, and having to support and guide other people who are subject matter experts oftentimes in that area. So, I say empathy and figuring out how to lead without ego. That's a challenge. That's something I hope to do every day and probably fail like every day. But if you really can figure out how to lead without ego, legitimately, it changes everything. Because if your goal is to simply get the job done and not worry about who gets credit for it, not worry about who didn't acknowledge the work you did when you said X, Y, Z. Now, is it right for them to do that? No, it's not right. But the question is, how are you going to process all of it? Are you going to take it in, or are you going to just say, you know what? The end result was fantastic. I'm not there. I'm just going to be clear. I'm not saying I'm there, Nicole. I'm saying this is my goal to be there. That's what I strive for every day. So I would say empathy and figuring out how to really just almost erase your ego from all interactions and thoughts and judgments.
And that's tough. Leading without ego, I would say, you know, a lot of us in leadership positions, you probably strive for that too, but it's hard because when you've gotten to a certain point, you're like, yes, I know what I'm talking about, and you better treat me like I know what I'm talking about, right? And it's hard to sometimes like let that go, right? You already got to the position, girl. No one's challenging you on that anymore, but we don't necessarily think that way. So I think that is something that's definitely a goal, and it's certainly hard, particularly when you're a person of color who's like made it into some role. You're like, yeah, you better treat me right, you know. But I love that you mentioned the empathy part too. Particularly, I just find during this time, more than ever, during this pandemic, just being empathetic and understanding where people are coming from and what they're dealing with on a regular basis while also still performing. We need that so much in our managers and our leaders. You and I both mentor a lot of people as well. We have mentees. Can you think about what is a trait or a characteristic that you've seen some emerging leaders do that's like, you know, gonna sidetrack their career trajectory? Can you talk about what are some of those things you've seen?
This was one of the questions you gave me before, and I was like, I spent some time on this one. I would say there are about a couple of things. One is arrogance. I have to tell you, you know, when you're mentoring folks, and a lot of us on the call, like, you're smart people. We're smart. Like, we're good at what we do. But arrogance, I think, just immediately puts up a limit and a roadblock. I mean, there's nothing that sort of stops the desire to mentor someone like arrogance, right? Like immediately you're like, I'm taking time away from my babies to have
right. So you know all the answers already. Oh, okay.
Okay, right. So I would say that's one. You know, and a kissing cousin to arrogance is just, you know, the self-centered person who you can tell is just really in it for themselves. And let me be clear. Let me just say a couple of things. Being ambitious, wanting to be successful, having, you know, just, you know, reaching for the stars in every shape, way, and form is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're doing it from a place recognizing, one, you're not doing it, you didn't get there alone, and two, you're trying to bring up other folks with you, I'm all about it. But there are individuals who come and want to be mentored and sponsored and want to progress in their careers, quite frankly, but you can tell that, like, the energy and effort you put in them is going to stop there. They're going to get to where they get to, and that's going to be it, right? There's not going to be anybody else come with them. And that just is, that is like,
you don't have time for that. Yeah, it's frustrating, and you don't have, you're a busy general counsel. You don't have that kind of time to invest in someone where, like you said, it's just going to stop right there.
And I also think, like, look, maybe this is old school, but as people who are underrepresented, we don't have the luxury to have that outlook. We just do not.
I agree. You're right. I think that also makes me think about, I don't know if I had talked to you about this before, but just thinking about women, particularly, you know, it being International Women's Day. Do you think that those qualities that you just mentioned, the arrogance, the self-centeredness, do you think that when women display them, that it's even harder for them to advance in the workplace?
Absolutely. And unfairly so, right? Right. Yeah. The punishment should be like equally meted out. But I do think that corporate environments are especially tougher on women who, quite frankly, even sometimes when women just exhibit ambition, right? The assumption is that ambition is coming from some sort of self-motivated, self-centered, arrogant place. And at times, sometimes when that same level of ambition is articulated or exemplified by a male colleague, it's not taken in the same way. So I absolutely think that there's a little bit of an unevenness there. But you know what? You need to be aware of it, and you can correct for it.
Absolutely. And when you think about just, the different paths that you've had during your career, what would you say is something that you're most proud of that you've done professionally?
I have to tell you, it's, watching some of it's some of the attorneys I've been able to bring into the New York Life Department. Some absolutely phenomenal lawyers that have come over to the company that I've been able to support. It's watching folks that I've been mentoring for a while ascend into executive officer roles themselves and be killing it, just crushing it. It's the best feeling ever. And I had that feeling, actually got to feel that today. We had an executive management committee meeting, and a couple of folks that I've been mentoring and working with closely came and did a presentation in front of the management committee, and they were phenomenal. It's anytime I get to have that experience where you just watch them shine, whatever difficult day you had, whatever heavy lift you had before was worth it. So it's just, iterations of that experience, because it can be difficult. It can be difficult. And those are sort of living manifestations that it's all worth it. So it made my day.
Awesome. And what has kept you motivated during this pandemic time? I think people are still struggling with just putting on real clothes. What's keeping you motivated during this time?
Look, 2020 it was more than I think any of us sort of thought it was going to be, even with the beginning of the pandemic. I'm really motivated by the social justice movement that has, I think, taken root in a way in the last year that I don't think it has before. As tired as I am, and as tired as I know you are, Nicole, and I see, oh my God, the names I see on the chat, Sheila Boston, Paula Edgar, these folks are like warriors, right? As tired as I know we all feel, I think we also, right? But we also kind of feel the level of opportunity right now. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that it will be a movement, not a moment. I believe that we don't have to jump on everything right this second, but there is a heightened focus right now that we cannot afford to lose sight of. So, when I think about what motivates me, I think the opportunity to make change, lasting change right now and in the future, I think it's just to me unparalleled. And when you start to feel that groundswell, from a social justice perspective, from a business perspective, from a governmental perspective, right? Institutional, like you're talking about real change. I can't not be motivated by that, no matter how tired I am, because I have to tell you, tired. Yeah. I know you're tired.
All tired. We are all tired. And I'm physically tired, right? I'm carrying a baby. Oh! I'm actually tired. But I hear you. And I think that, the social justice movement, again, we have women leading the forefront of that. Shout out to Miss Stacey Abrams down there in Georgia doing her thing with our voters initiatives and trying to make sure people, get access to their right to vote. And we have, Madam Vice President, in the White House. There's a lot that's going on, but then there's so much that we're still, oh yeah, shout out to all the AKAs, Divine Nine, and all of y'all who are out here listening tonight. But I think that, even with those strides, there's still so much that we need to do and so far that we have to go. When I see the statistics about working mothers who are now no longer working mothers, they've had to leave the workforce during this pandemic to take care of family members and loved ones and parents and children. And to know that the theme of International Women's Day is to choose to challenge. we have to challenge our institutions, our government, our elected officials to put in place things that can, mechanisms that can help women who are being caregivers, but also need to work and keep money in their households, right? Like there's just so much work that needs to be done. And the social justice uprising that happened, it touches on so many other things, racial, economic, political, you know, it just kind of awakened everybody. And I'm glad to see companies are stepping up. New York Life, I know, is doing a lot around diversity initiatives. And do you feel like a lot more is happening at New York Life, particularly when it comes to women and gender equity, particularly?
You know, I think the beautiful thing about the company is we've been on this journey for quite some time, right? I think it was 2006 when we started the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and it had its own, like, you know, head of D&I and focus. This was in 2006. And when I just joined the company in I joined the company in 2014. And you remember in 2016, there was another slate of unarmed Black men that were killed by police officers. It was very similar, quite frankly, to what we saw in 2020, on camera, right? And successive incidents. Yeah. Back then, New York Life held a series of courageous conversations, which was led by our CEO, and to talk about the murder of unarmed Black men then. So we've been on that path for quite some time. And I have to tell you that experience, I will never forget the feeling, because there were people in, you know, it was open to the entire company. Our auditorium was filled. I remember people were crying in that auditorium. And a lot of my white colleagues, you know, were saying things like, I just didn't know it was like that. I didn't know it was that pronounced. So 2020, we realized we had to take it to another level, even with all of the work we'd already done. So I think that there has been a renewed focus in terms of even expanding and broadening what it was we were already doing. But the company, and so one of the reasons why I chose it, is one of the reasons why I came to New York Life, had already seen the import of diversity long before this particular period of time, but recognize that there is a ton more we can do and are doing in 2020 and beyond.
Yeah. And like I started out with that stat about, you know, the Black general counsels in the Fortune 1000, that there being only 53. Do y'all got a club? Do y'all?
We do. We got a club. No, we do. Oh, we really do. We really do.
But it's good to see that there are initiatives to actually continue to increase that number of Black general counsels, so that we don't just have 53, right? We're not, you know, you're not a unicorn, Natalie. You're to be part of something that's a regular occurrence for people to see. And for those of us who are in-house, for us to feel like we can get to that seat, because we see people who look like you in that seat. I want to shift gears a little bit before we run out of time. You know, we've talked about some heavy topics. We've talked about some good leadership advice and things, but I want to know, how do you unwind? Like, are you binge watching Bridgerton like the rest of us? Have you read Obama's new book? It's like 400 pages. Like, what do you do to unwind when you're not being fabulous general counsel, phenomenal leader? What do you do?
You know, you have a 3-year-old, I have a 7-year-old, and I have an 11-year-old, right? So a lot of what I do to unwind is dictated by them, right? So I get to watch my 7-year-old play with his trains. He's really big into electrical trains. I mean, like, we have a whole setup, like old school electric trains running all over the house. And the 11-year-old, unfortunately, is into like video games, which I'm not into. So I have to watch him play video games. For me personally, yes, I have, first of all, Bridgerton is old. If you just now get into Bridgerton, I don't know, Nicole. I was like, that's old.
Yeah, my son is 3, so that takes a lot more. I'm watching more Elmo and you know, Daniel Tiger than anything. And then when I could finally get around to watching something, it's very late and after everybody else has already watched it.
Yes. But yes, Bridgerton was dope. The bomb. You gotta go with the Spotify like soundtrack, which is everything. Like classical music, like pop music taken to like the classical level is just next level. But we could exchange Netflix and Hulu and all the other things later. But yeah, I mean you have to refresh, right? And shout out to my line sister. We started like a group chat, so now like we get to connect and at least chat with each other over text, and just a lot more. I've had spent a lot more time with friends, even though it's virtual. Yeah. I have been much more committed to spending that time to see all the people who recharge my battery. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, as Black folk, we have got to take our personal health more seriously. And life insurance company, we want people to live long, healthy lives. We all need to take physical activity more seriously. The pandemic has caused such loss in our community. And, we're all much more sedentary than we probably were even before the pandemic. So, if there's one thing I would say, if everyone could just commit to, and I'm working on this because I'm terrible too at this, but commit to thinking about their health, their physical and mental health, and actually giving ourselves a mandate like we do with our careers, right? To get ourselves physically healthy and mentally healthy. I think that's sometimes that's more important than the career.
Absolutely. Taking advantage of it being an action, like a verb, mental health, whether that be seeking assistance, talking to someone, physical health, finding your Peloton group to ride with, or whatever it is you need to do. Yes, we need to take care of ourselves mentally and physically. And even the MBBA actually has a Saturday morning free workout. So members, you can join that at 9 a.m. on Saturdays and get your movement, get yourself active. Natalie, I am so glad that you could do this. I'm really happy that I get to see you in this virtual way. It's such a pleasure to have spent this time with you. I think you shared some good nuggets with us. I loved when you said that you need to surround yourself with people who feed your soul. I love that. And I think that is so true. And that helps probably with your mental and your physical health as well. Thank you so much for participating in this tonight. I really do appreciate you spending the time that I know is very valuable.
Thanks for asking me. And hopefully we get to see each other in person sometime soon.
I know. And thank everybody who has tuned in tonight. And we saw all your messages popping up in the chat. So thank you for being engaged and listening to us. And we also want you at the MBBA to check out our website at www.mbbanyc.org, where you can sign up for other parts of the series for Women's History Month. We're talking to all sorts of great women who are doing their thing in the law. And again, like I said, we need to give people their flowers now. We need to honor them now and amplify their voices now. So please check out the website so you can sign up for more of our events. And thank you so much for participating tonight. Be well, everyone.